Good morning, Rita.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Thrive with Us. I am very excited to be chatting with you about something that I know you and myself and other couples therapists are seeing quite a lot in the clinic, which is the topic of infidelity, what it is, and how to overcome it from an individual and relationship perspective. So I'm excited to pick your brain in a few minutes about that.
Mhm.
I just want to quickly introduce you to our audience. I'm sitting here today with Rita Figueiredo with a master's in clinical and health psychology from the University of Lisbon in Portugal. She's been with us at Thrive Wellbeing Center since February 2024, where she supports individuals, adults, and couples through a range of issues, including relationship challenges and infidelity. And so we're going to hear from her about her clinical experience and expertise today. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me here.
All right, so let's just dive right in.
Yeah.
Infidelity. It's a word that we hear if we Google it, if we chat with our friends about it. There's a lot of different layers and types. So, how can we help people understand what infidelity or cheating is?
Well, that's a good one. Infidelity is this universally condemned thing. It's a monster, although it's universally practiced.
Yes.
This is a hard truth of infidelity. We try to run away from it, but it seems to be almost everywhere. It's like a monster. Um, we define infidelity when a breach of trust or a betrayal in the agreement of that couple happened. Basically, this is infidelity. And because from my clinical experience, what I see is that couples are very unique and they have their own rules and their own rituals and truths. So each couple may define infidelity in a different way. For some couples, it's very obvious that when we have physical intimacy with someone else, that's infidelity. But other couples, for example, they find as a betrayal when you have, I don't know, a dinner with your girlfriends. That could be felt as a betrayal. Okay, every time that I feel that I was replaced by something else, and I lost my exclusivity space in you, in your life.
You bring up a very, very important point, which is that people can define it in lots of different ways. You mentioned at the beginning that it is something universal, it happens universally, it's also universally taboo. I think universally, most people can agree on the physical intimacy piece, but it's the other stuff that's a little bit more complicated. And I don't know about you, but what I'm noticing a lot with the couples that I work with, and even when I speak to people that I know, is that many people are not having those conversations around what are our boundaries. Is it infidelity to be in touch with your ex partner? Is it infidelity to like or comment another person from the opposite gender's posts or photos on a social media page? Is it infidelity to direct message somebody that you know or that you don't know? Where is the line?
Yeah, where is the line is the question. And probably it's one of the most important steps within couples therapy on infidelity is to reach that point when we try to define the most explicit agreement for each of us, what makes sense for us. And because all of those things, they are acceptable, right? And as a therapist, I'm not in a place of judgment, right? I'm not the one defining that, but how people define that, it is quite important, at least to have that explicit agreement and that explicit negotiation. Why is this so important for you? Where does it come from? It's from a past relationship. It's something that you learned that it's a threat for you. Why is it there?
I think there's a number of pieces there with what you just shared. The first is that as a therapist, we don't have a checklist or a rule book. So people can't come to us and say, is it cheating or is it not cheating? We're not in a position to place that
Now, is it
judgment.
for you?
Exactly. And that's the thing. I think a lot of couples will have this conversation in crisis rather than proactively.
Definitely.
And
Unfortunately, because that would be so protective.
yes, absolutely. And exactly. Being proactive about it will help understand. And you mentioned a really, really essential layer to this, which is not just the lists of do's and don'ts within a relationship, but the why. Why is this a problem? Because, one person might be completely against maintaining contact with an ex partner or all ex partners, and the other person doesn't get that, right? And maybe the person who has that as a line, as a boundary, would have been okay with it before experiencing a previous breach of trust or something that happened to them perhaps in their childhood or to a friend recently. And
true.
so adding in that explanation of what it means and how it's interpreted might make it a little bit easier to negotiate, as you said.
But that leads me to another question that I find very relevant, especially in couples when we have a man and a woman, right? And which is the double standards.
Okay.
We find that a lot. And there is double standards many times. What is allowed to me, it's not allowed to you. And
Yes.
that is a critical point, of course, in a relationship and in this negotiation. We want, ideally, equitable partners, right? We have the same value and we are equal as much as possible. So that discussion also tends to raise this question about gender and what is kind of allowed or not based on your gender.
Yes, no, definitely. And I can imagine people asking the question of, well, why is it okay for you to do this and not okay for me? Why do I expect you to abide by this, but I don't expect myself? And so gender, I think, is an important layer. And then I think it also intersects with culture.
And as a systemic psychologist, I cannot separate these things. We are constantly interconnected and we all fuel each other. Culture fuels my individual relationships and my individual beliefs. And the other way around as well, right? I also influence my culture and my society and my community, right? But these things are clearly interconnected and they are a topic in infidelity.
Yes, definitely. And I think, you made an important point about things being equitable. And we know from research that relationships that are relatively egalitarian and equitable and reciprocal tend to be relationships that last longer and are more satisfying. I think sometimes people confuse equitable with exactly the same.
No, it doesn't need to be that.
No, it doesn't. And it's not about, okay, well, you can't do this. Well, I can't do this. Well, you can't do that. I can't do that. Maybe something makes sense in the context of our relationship that it applies to me and doesn't apply to you, as long as there's also something that's kind of the inverse that can still feel equitable. So it's not necessarily a tit for tat. It's just that overarching feeling of this is fair.
Yeah, exactly. Fairness. There's justice in our relationship.
Okay, so when it comes to infidelity, we talked about physical intimacy violations being something that's kind of universally accepted as a taboo, despite the fact that we see it all the time. There's also this idea of emotional infidelity. Can you walk us through what that looks like?
Yeah, usually we define emotional infidelity, or people define it as something that happens that doesn't involve physical intimacy, right? But I have a deep connection. I find very interesting to have deep conversations with someone else. And that happens. That also happens a lot. And that gets in the office of a couples therapist. We know that, again, based on gender, we know that sometimes women are more I don't know if I can say this, but women tend to enroll in these types of emotional connection with someone else. So I feel so disconnected with my partner that I look for that outside. But also men, actually. I've worked with men that looked for an emotional, deeper connection with someone else, with a lover, and not because they don't have that with their partner. But that's very usually the types of infidelity in our perspective as a therapist. I would say that they are important, and especially in the beginning, we address that. What happened, right? We want to know, basically, we want to know what happened, for how long, what kind of things you did with that person, right? And eventually we will get to the whys, or what motivated you to do that, what were you looking for exactly. And as per my individual experience in therapy, I find that very detrimental when it is emotional infidelity involved, and maybe not physical, but emotional. That is, ouch, right? Yeah. Because I was really, the other one, the betrayed partner, was really replaced, right? It was not a one night stand. It was not something just physical, purely physical, but no, this emotional connection that was so special about us, right? And that is highly damaging, because our relationship was previously a perceived safe space, and apparently it wasn't for you. And this is hard to accept and to deal with, of course.
What's coming up for me as you're sharing this, and I definitely agree with the points that you raised, is this concept of something being sacred. And it's that violation of, this was supposed to be ours. That can apply to the physical aspect, but it can also apply to the emotional. It can be incredibly painful to discover that your partner is calling someone else, to debrief about the day, to share hopes and dreams on the way to and from the office, when that was something that probably at the beginning or in earlier stages of your relationship was a ritual of connection. And I find a lot of the time, I don't know if it's the same for you, that the betrayed partner will then wonder if any of it was ever real. Like, you were able to do this with someone else.
Yeah, you
so
were able
did it matter?
Yeah, exactly.
Did I matter? Did we matter?
That I believe that is the hardest part of this process, and the healing process, probably, if that happens, is to confront myself with the idea that you, my partner, you, my safe space, you, my confidant, you lied to my face. And for a period of time, short or long, doesn't matter, but for a period of time, you were able to lie to my face, and that is devastating. And the betrayed partner loses their ground, right? They lose their ground. They don't have anything to walk on, right, and to move forward. They lost it.
It's very destabilizing.
That is, the devastating part of it.
Yeah.
But actually, and going back to different types of infidelity, I also define infidelity as something that, so every movement that you, my partner, have for you to look for pleasure outside of me is considered infidelity sometimes. And this usually, this could be something very small, right? Like you are having a dinner with your friends tonight and not with me. You are prioritizing other things over me, and this could be felt as infidelity, or just our exclusive, intimate relationship. But yeah.
As you say that, part of me is wondering, we said at the beginning there's the different types, like physical and emotional, I think are the two that are the most talked about. And then you raise the point of someone might feel that their partner is betraying them by having or experiencing pleasure and joy with others, even from the same gender, even in a platonic relationship. And we said that, it's really helpful for all couples to define what infidelity looks like. But if someone comes and says, well, for me, my boundary is I'm your only joy, I'm your only pleasure, you don't have any other friends, you don't have any other confidants, everything nice and fun in your life either has to be experienced on your own or with me. And maybe that's a little bit of an extreme example, but is that reasonable?
I don't think it is reasonable because, well, such a burden on your partner, right? We live in a society. We need other people. We're not islands, definitely. We need other people. Ideally, our needs, emotional needs, whatever, right? Our needs are met, well, at first by ourselves.
Yes.
We are responsible for meeting our needs. But then if we place the responsibility of meeting my needs in only one person in the world, that feels unfair. Because I believe that people who request for that, they require that to happen to them, but probably, most likely, they are not good. They are not okay with the idea of me being the same person for you. I need my personal space. I need my time. I need my, right? I probably have different boundaries. That, that could lead us to talk about toxic relationships, right? And where everything in your life should be about me. This is probably not healthy, of course, because and actually that I believe it's a challenge for a therapist. But we really have to debate and to discuss about these ideas. What is behind that? And what the first idea when I was listening to you, the first idea that popped up was the relational ladder, right? And in monogamy, we tend to have this script where my romantic relationship is my number one priority and should be the pinnacle of my life, right? And my relational life. That is the first place. And sometimes people want to make the romantic relationship to occupy the first, the second, the third place. Ideally, we should debate this idea. We are not happy or fulfilled only with one person, and actually other relationships can really fuel positively our romantic relationship. Who am I, right? If I am only with you for you, who am I? What am I giving to you?
And also, as much as we would like all romantic relationships that begin to continue in perpetuity, the reality is that they don't. So if every single thing about me and what I need is being met, or I'm relying on you to help me meet those needs, then what happens in the event that our relationship is no longer possible?
Exactly. I'm going to be lost.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing from you a lot of different things. So when I was asking you the question about, is this reasonable? You mentioned that, well, it doesn't even sound very nice or healthy for one person to exclusively meet the needs of another. And we know that it's important in a relationship for people to have that overlap, that interdependence, but also independence and other relationships. And you also mentioned, again, this concept of double standards, which is often the people that are making these very long lists of requirements that are about sort of isolating the other person, that they're not willing to have those same standards applied to them.
Yep. And that's so unfair. And that creates such an imbalance in the relationship and probably a source of conflict. I can see that happening. So that doesn't seem reasonable to ask for that. But we should ask questions. We should ask why, where does it come from? Where did you learn that? Why is it such a threat for you that your partner has other people in their lives and other habits and other activities that don't necessarily involve you all the time? Why is it there? It is just fine to have that. And actually, people who try to accommodate to these requests, well, I would say this probably is a jump for a conclusion, but I would say that these are the type of things that make us permeable for infidelity to knock on our door, right? When we are completely caged in a relationship, we desperately want to reconnect again with my own identity. Who am I in this relationship?
Independent of this relationship.
Exactly. We need that. Actually, about that interdependence, I use a lot this sentence with my couples. The challenge, and probably one of the number one challenge in relationships, and especially long-term relationships, I would say, is how do I keep myself interesting enough that I am a book that my partner wants to keep reading, right? Throughout our life. I don't want to be, I don't want my partner to reach the final chapter and then put me on a shelf, right? I don't want to be that. So I need other things. I need other activities or other people or other interests besides my romantic relationship.
So it serves so many purposes. It serves the purpose of helping you identify and learn more about yourself, helping you connect with yourself, making you probably feel a bit more in control of your life. It fuels the romantic partnership and that interest. And hopefully the other person is also maintaining themselves as a book that you want to pick up and read. So this idea of implementing boundaries and having that conversation is very, very critical. At the same time, we don't want to so narrowly, or no, not narrowly, broadly define betrayal and infidelity that it causes us to lose our sense of self, our sense of independence, and our sense of autonomy in our relationships.
Actually, those are the ingredients that we know that contribute to infidelity. I don't know about you, but couples therapy in general, we changed a bit in the last decades our perspective about infidelity. We used to think that infidelity is only there because there's a problem in this relationship, right? And so that the problem is so evident that one of the partners has to look up for something outside. We know now that most probably infidelity is more about individual identity than the relationship. Probably we will find difficulties in the relationship that they were there before, failures, right, of the relationship. But and I feel it's very important to mention this, especially with couples and in the beginning of the process, because many times the betrayed partner carries a lot of guilt, right? As if somehow I made this happen, right? I led him or her to do that. I put myself in this place. And this is unfair. It's always about the other person, the cheater, right? The cheater had a decision on their hands. And they had the chance to say no, and they didn't, right? Why is another question. But usually it is about me, and it is about my identity. What am I looking for that I couldn't find in my relationship? And going to that point about people who are really fused with their partners, I usually ask, what was the last time that you felt really a separated entity from your partner? when was the last time that you admired your partner just for what they are, right? As this other individual with those ingredients that you were mentioning: autonomy, identity, independence, even, right? But autonomy, it's here, it's central here. We we know now that most of the times the cheater is looking for autonomy. I'm not running away from my partner. Actually, some studies, they show us that the great majority of couples, they want to stay together. The partner doesn't want to be with the third element, right? The cheater doesn't want to
Be with the affair partner.
Exactly. When we betray our partners, we are not trying to run away from my partner, and sometimes not from our relationship. What we are trying to run away is from the person that I became in this relationship, from that identity. That is the thing that I'm looking for outside of this relationship. It's the diapers that I have to change every night when I come back from work. It's the rituals of the routine, the monotony in my
Yes.
relationship. That is something that I want to. I'm tired of this. I don't want to keep experiencing this because I don't like myself. Who am I?
I don't recognize myself even.
Exactly. I get lost, right? In the beginning of the relationship, we did that. We compromised a lot to accommodate to my partner. And I believe that that is an interesting reflection as well that we have to make. What were those compromises that I did in the beginning? Some pieces of me that probably I lost about myself in order to protect this relationship. It's fine that they're there. It's fine that we lose some part of ourselves to adjust to this new partner. It's fine. The thing is, or the question is, what are the consequences of that? How do I again, how do I reinforce this commitment throughout my relationship with this partner without, feeling resentment, and that I cannot really recognize myself in this place. And many times, and again, nothing unrelated. An affair is also, or usually, about desire, right? And this desire is not, it's desire of this identity. It's desire to connect again with this person that I was previously, or that I was in the beginning of this relationship, but it's no longer there. Desire is very high in the beginning of a relationship because we are absorbing the other one, right? I want to know everything about you.
Infatuation.
Exactly. We just want to be with the other one, right? And for a period of time, it is quite okay for us to lose that identity, right? Bits and pieces of my identity for me to just to be with you. This is welcome in the beginning of the relationship. And if we think about the ingredients that we have there in the beginning we have risk because, love is probably the most riskiest thing in life, right? We have to give up of so many things and safety in order to find you in the other side of this bridge, right? It is risk. There's transgression also there. There's adventure, curiosity. All of that is there in the beginning. But then, and ideally, we move through this or towards this other stage of a relationship to find security, safety, stability, predictability, monotony, routine, right? We want to have that. Although we know that other place, very, very desired, but also it kills desire, and it kills this part that keeps me feeling alive, right? And I don't feel alive anymore with you. And many times what I see in couples therapy is we were looking for that when we looked outside,
And
right?
I think so. A lot of people will wonder what causes cheating. And I think, like any other psychology question, the answer is not a simple or a direct one. It's a multi layered, multifaceted, and nuanced one. So, what I'm hearing from you is that there are inputs from the partner, the person who is doing the betrayal. And as you said before, and I think it's important to reiterate, even if we're unpacking or discussing some of the motivations, they are the transgressor and they are the ones who chose to go outside of that marriage, and that responsibility is with them. But there's factors about them, perhaps the loss of identity that you mentioned. There are factors about the relationship, the way that it has changed. Um, and so and then there's also opportunity, right?
Definitely, yes.
And so there's a lot of different bits and pieces. So again, it's not like there's a way to cheat proof your relationship, because there are so many factors that play a role in whether or not somebody is going to stray outside of the relationship. And our role as couples therapists, who usually will see these couples in crisis after the affair has been revealed, and most of the time, I don't know about you, the affair is discovered rather than volunteered.
True.
So emotions are very, very heightened, and it's a difficult balance to sit with and support the person who is on the receiving end of that transgression, but also try to understand, if you are coming here for the purpose of rebuilding, which is what most people want to do in our experience, and also according to the research that you mentioned, how do I help you identify where the issues or challenges were without you also feeling blamed?
That's very tricky, I would say. The same way that I was mentioning these factors, that what makes me cheat my partner is not that I don't love this person. Usually that's not the case. That I don't want to be in this relationship. Usually that's not the case. But what I was looking for was something different about myself, right? Another version of myself outside of this place. The same ingredients. So the challenge is, if I do that outside of the relationship, why can't I do that within this relationship? So what causes infidelity, it's probably the same thing that could prevent infidelity to happen. The challenge, because if we think about it, the common script about infidelity, it's all about transgression, risk, adventure, right? So it's very easy. It's so easy to find those ingredients in a third person. The challenge, I would say, is how do we find these same ingredients in
In our
this
partner.
relationship?
Exactly.
Exactly. So the same things that cause or that lead us to be unfaithful, they are the exact same ones that protect us and that prevent us from being unfaithful.
Yeah. And I think at the beginning, when someone is starting to connect, there's this concept, I don't know if you've heard of it, but the concept of micro cheating, which is all the small things that are usually accepted and are considered okay, that create a context, an opportunity where cheating might happen. And so, what I think could be helpful is for people listening or watching this, if you are noticing that you are really interested and looking forward to connecting with another person outside of the relationship, a helpful question, while hopefully being able to maintain the boundaries that you've agreed upon with your partner is, what am I getting out of this interaction? How is it making me feel? Like you said, is it exciting because I'm able to talk about something other than the dirty diapers and the dirty dishes?
Definitely.
I am able to share my hopes and dreams that don't have to do with my retirement plan and some of those things that are really important and we definitely have to think about and we have to talk about. But when it dominates, it ends up becoming a problem. And also, you know, what you can commonly find on all those checklists online of like how to tell if someone is cheating. One of the things is like they're starting to put more effort into the way that they look, right? Because that's another thing, especially when you have a young family or a more established family unit. If you're further along in the family life cycle, the same level of energy and effort isn't there for yourself, most importantly, and also for your partner.
Yeah, and actually, we have some data that tells us the older people are, the more likely they are to cheat their partners. So, in the beginning of our lives, the younger age groups, like between teenage years or early adulthood, we kind of, even based in even considering the gender, we it's almost the same rate that men and women cheat, but it's definitely not the same when we are older. But increasing, we are even more cheaters with the end of life. Okay. Which is interesting.
Very.
And it goes directly to your point that maybe, yeah, I'm older. I'm done. I'm tired of this place, and I want to have an exciting thing, right? I'm so used to this place. And again, what I was saying before, when was the last time that you saw your partner as a separate person? When we find our partners taking care of themselves in a different way, they are really doing that to please someone else, right? But that is a highlight for me, and I detect it because I also saw my partner as a different person, right? Oh,
Where did that come from?
yeah,
I haven't seen that in a while.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Right? You're handsome today, right? Who are you? And why isn't that for me? But it could be. That's the thing. It could be for me, the partner, the long-term partner.
Well, see, the reason that came up for me is because at the beginning we were talking about desire and spontaneity. And, you know, in the early days of a relationship, as you said, it's like you look at the person with starry eyes. Everything is so exciting and I want to talk and learn more. And oh my God, you are so funny and you're so this and you're so that. And we put in so much effort to present our best side, right?
True.
And understandably, it's not really sustainable. Other things come in the way. There are different priorities, but it's amazing the difference a long-term couple can find by simply booking a date night, and rather than just going to the place down the road that they go to all the time, going somewhere a bit special, getting dressed up, meeting at a certain time, and kind of going through some of those early courtship experiences. It can be really helpful for building that desire between the partners. And also, as you said so many times and so importantly, feeling like I didn't lose myself in this relationship and to my life cycle right now.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, about spontaneity, I have a lot of couples that come with that. She's not spontaneous anymore. She doesn't book a restaurant out of nowhere, unexpectedly, blah, blah, blah. And many times I ask my clients, how did you do that in the beginning? We were scheduling everything. We were scheduling date nights. We were scheduling if tonight we're going to the movies, or we're gonna have just a night out, or a dinner, or whatever. We were scheduling. But in the beginning, it didn't seem
It didn't feel like that.
yeah, it doesn't seem like a threat for our relationship. Oh, there's no spontaneous acts here. There weren't, and it was fine. So we tend, again, the scripts that we learn in society, right, about romantic love, that everything, it is more valuable if it is spontaneous. And of course, spontaneity is there and is welcomed. Of course it is. And that to break the routine, right? To do something that instead of going to the same restaurant all the time, yeah, we can just try a new thing tonight. That is, again, that's risky. But also how transgressive it is for me to, going back to your point that in the beginning we kind of conceal our shadows, right? We show, we give to the other one our best version, which is okay. It's beneficial, of course. We want the other one to fall in love, not to be repulsed. But how transgressive it is for me, even after 20 years together, to be vulnerable, to show or to have a conversation about my fragilities. How transgressive that is, right? Because I think that we tend to conceptualize transgression or risk or adventure as something really out of nowhere and unexpected, but sometimes we do find transgression in, well, what we would call calm things.
Yes.
Right?
It's not just about jumping out of a plane.
Exactly. How transgressive it is for me to have a difficult conversation with you about something that I need and I don't have and I would like to have with you. This is also, right? This shakes things.
Yeah.
And this is important to, and I believe that I work with this on this with my couples throughout the healing process of infidelity, to remind ourselves that we can find these ingredients in many, many, many places and in many ways.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the actual healing process. So we said before, and you agreed with me, that most of the time the couples that have experienced infidelity will come to us in crisis. And most of the time, if not all of the time, it's usually one person who has betrayed the other rather than each of them kind of being a perpetrator and a victim in the same space. And so how do you work with that? Let's walk our audience through what they can expect if they've experienced this or someone they know has experienced this. What's going to happen in that therapy room?
Well, to start with, it is very difficult to work with infidelity, especially, and from my experience, I don't know about you, but usually couples come into therapy right after the discovery phase, right? They have just found out and they come to therapy. Sometimes I have couples that they found out like a couple of or a few months ago, but sometimes it's just a few days ago. And that is, I would say, intense. It is very, we can feel the raw pain,
Yes.
right? People come really with open wounds, right? So in the beginning, and I would say that the first stage of it is really to manage the crisis, right? To manage this impact on each one of them. It's different, I know, and we have to acknowledge these differences. It's different to be the betrayed partner or the one who cheated, but it is intense and difficult for both of them. So in couples therapy, I think sometimes I feel that couples come with a preconception of that the couples therapist will make a stronger alliance with the betrayed partner because it's the victim. But actually, I don't conceptualize it like that. I think the couple is a victim, right? This happened to both of you, and it is difficult for both of you. So in the first stage, and I would say that we have like 3 phases in the process. The first stage, I call it the discovery. And it's really about this. How do we deal with the impact of what happened? How do we, well, usually a key word is self-care. We have to take care of ourselves. For the betrayed partner, usually involves how to deal with the flashbacks, because I read a message and that message is constantly popping up in my mind. Or I asked a lot of questions of what happened, and you told me some detailed information. You gave me some detailed information about what happened, and I have fantasies and images about that.
Yeah.
How do I deal with that? Another component of that first phase, a very important one, is boundaries. Usually, people tend to make conditions, right? For this to work, I will have some demands on the table. One is for you, common ones I will mention, for you to tell me all the truth. And there I try to discuss this with my couples. What's the extension of information that you will have, that you will know, and you will have forever. Sometimes we definitely kill words, places, activities. We don't need to give all to our partners. Although I understand the position of the cheater, right? It is my way to show you that you can trust.
Yes, I'm an open book.
I am, yes. Everything is on the table right now. So I'm coming clear about everything. This is me being so trustworthiness. It is not, okay? People have different ways of showing and rebuilding this trust. So don't worry about that. And please protect yourselves from giving too much of information. So that boundary is an important one. Another condition that people have in place, well, it is sometimes we have to go to couples therapy, right?
Yes.
That's a condition. We're gonna try, or without an external help, we cannot move forward. So we need that. Another boundary is those conditions about, well, a loss of privacy, right? From now on, you have to share your live location with me. From now on, you have to send me videos or photos about what you are eating, who are you with, blah, 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 right? A lot of things. Passcodes, access to your email. I have to have free access to your bank accounts, email, Instagram account, whatever, right? WhatsApp, whatever. And every night, if I want to ask, every night I can ask, and you have to give me your phone, okay? And I try to discuss this with my couples that, well, even a criminal, we don't lose our basic rights, right? When we make something wrong in the world, in society, legally speaking. So the same thing should be applied in relationships. We don't lose our basic rights. Although, because there's a very specific function in this loss of privacy, for example.
Yes.
Ideally, we make an agreement and a negotiation. We can negotiate for how long this will be in place. For example, I have many couples that they don't share the same bedroom, or even you have to rent another apartment. For how long that will be a solution, right? Because sometimes people do this in a very creative way. They're trying their best, for sure. They do this to prevent the triggers, for example, right? Just your presence is triggering me.
Yes.
So we have to do that. But And that's okay. For how long? The same thing about my access to your live location or to your WhatsApp messages. For how long that will be in place. So this is something that we also address. Another boundary, I would say, is who knows and who gets to know about this.
And what do they get to know?
And to what extent? Yes, what do I can share with A, B, or C? And here I highlight just this one because when couples have kids, this is tricky. I would advise not to involve kids, like as a basic rule. Just because if you ask me how infidelity gets in my office in different situations, it gets in my office for 4 reasons. Either I see the partner who cheated on someone, the partner who was cheated on, the lover, the other ones, sometimes they come, they suffer as well, and the kids and families, right? My parents, they had...
And sometimes the parents don't know that the children know.
They know, exactly. And this is potentially damaging for them as well, not just for the family or the perspective that I as a child I have from my parents' marriage, whatever, but also for my own relationships, right? This is damaging. So if we can avoid it, perfect. It's better. Same thing about family members. If I want to share with your mom that you did that to me, I have to think that in case we want to stay together or we want to separate, that person will always have that information, right?
You can't unsay it.
We can't. Yeah, we can't. It's there. And we are opening a door for judgment as well, right? If I go online, and I see that a lot online, if people go online and share with people that, oh, I just found out that my partner cheated on me, blah, blah, blah. Usually 95% of the answers is
Divorce.
Leave that person, right? Run away immediately. And we know that
That's not what people want to do.
yeah, there's studies that show us 10% of people, they leave the relationship, but not the rest. So people don't want to leave the relationship, not even the betrayed partner. I don't want to leave this relationship. So to negotiate these boundaries, it is important to address them, to think about them, to consider the consequences of this in the short term and the long term.
Yes.
It is important. So basically, this is phase 1.
I think that with phase 1, there's a couple of things. So number 1, as you were saying, the person who usually has just found out is really raw. And one of the things that people need to understand is, as a function of that rawness, there's also the hypervigilance. And you were describing it when you were saying about giving too much information. Maybe some people watching today are thinking, well, no, I want to know everything. The issue is that when you know everything, sometimes you can't stop reliving it. And when you said places and activities, say, for example, that you found out that your partner was wining and dining this other person at a restaurant that you used to go to at the beginning of your relationship. For many people, that restaurant is finished, right? Or they travel together to this location that you had gone to before or that you were dreaming of going to. That is finished. And in terms of what it adds to the knowledge, like what that knowledge adds, often it's not very much. But at the same time, the person who has been betrayed thinks that by gathering all of that information, they will have more of a sense of control, maybe less of a sense of powerlessness, which makes sense.
Yeah, there's a function in this questioning. There's a function because usually what I see is from the betrayed partners, probably the most relevant emotion in the beginning is confusion, right? Everything is suddenly not there, right? My perception of things is completely out of place. So
Your reality got flipped upside down.
completely, the process of me asking a lot of questions is internally, it's me trying to find logic
Make
and
sense of what's happening.
make sense of everything.
Yes.
Because I'm so confused. That's the only thing that you can give me for me to puzzle things again, to connect pieces of that puzzle. But there's consequences of that. So of course people need to know some things, and generally speaking, yes, that is part of it, but refrain from having a lot of detailed questions and answers and a lot of information. It's not an advantage.
I think as well, sometimes the person who is the perpetrator at the beginning is happy to be the open book because they recognize the transgression and needing to create or recreate that sense of trust and safety again. But also, I don't know about you, but what I find is after some time, because for me also the first phase is about we're really tending to the needs in a lot of ways of the person who found out. And we're helping ground that person with the self-care, also making sure that there's a space for the perpetrator as well so that they can engage in the process. But it's a lot of information gathering with limits. So setting aside some time where I can ask questions, but it's not going to spill over because eventually what happens is the perpetrator is like, I'm done. I had this conversation like 8,000 times.
Yeah.
And then the victim is like, well, no, you're not done. If I want to have it 8,010 times, you're going to have it 8,010 times.
Yeah, and I'm entitled
And
to.
I'm entitled to it. And then both of them feel very, very, very stuck. And so one of the things I think is helpful for people to know and remember if they are trying to work through a betrayal is that right now it is your world. The intensity of it is really high. The frequency of the thoughts and the flashbacks and the images and all of these things is very, very often. It will dissipate over time, but there will be a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, things. You'll be watching Netflix with your partner.
Exactly.
And you will see a scene that reminds you of what happened and you will get activated. Yeah. Hopefully by then you've kind of learned to recognize what that's all about, have some self-regulation and co-regulation mechanisms in place to address it. And it happens much less frequently, but it's going to be there, just not the way that it is today.
Yeah. And actually, I believe that couples, when they come to couples therapy, they really want to move. So infidelity is suddenly this centerpiece on the table, right? It's central in our relationship. It is central in my mind, in my emotions. It is all about that. And initially, the first task, I would say, is how do we move this just a little bit? And in time, that will be something that it's definitely a rupture moment. It's definitely a turning point in the relationship. But in time, that will be something that happened there.
Yes.
Right? But it's not central anymore in our relationship. And just again about phase one, when we are addressing the impact and the meaning of what happened. So one of the questions is, what did it mean to you, the one who did it? What did it mean to you? This is something that we have to address. And what was the impact to you that I did that, right? We have to address these things. And here we have these different emotions. And for couples therapists, I believe this is a challenge, but it is a requirement. How do we hold space for both people's, both partners' emotions? Because I know that this is probably difficult to hear, but the cheater is probably full of guilt, right? Sometimes not, they don't feel guilty for what they did, but they feel guilty for what I made you feel,
Yes.
right? I don't feel guilty because I cheated. I feel guilty because I hurt you. And I didn't want that. So they're full of guilt, they're full of shame. And also, this is probably difficult, but sometimes there's grieving processes here. They also lost another person.
Which is, I think, something we didn't mention, but for couples therapy to continue, the
Yeah.
affair has to be over.
Yeah, for me, that's a rule. I don't know if there's therapists that work with that differently, but for me, that's a rule.
Me too.
That's a big no-no. The affair has to stop. Although this is kind of critical sometimes, especially when the relationship and that third person belongs either to our circle or a coworker, for
Yes.
example. This is very tricky because that other person is going to be in our lives. And this is a challenge, but we have to address that as well. And also that, how do the transgressor, the cheater, how do they deal with the new relationship that they have to have with that person? For example, at the workplace. How do we manage this? So all of this needs to be addressed in this phase one. How do we deal with the impact of this? Phase two, I call it context. It's where we dive deep into the factors. What made us permeable for this to happen to us? This is the question. And we go and we analyze individual factors, that paradox, right? What were you looking for outside of the relationship? What was missing here? How can we find these ingredients?
And what parts, like you were saying at the beginning, what parts of yourself do you feel like you lost?
Yeah, exactly.
And are craving to see again?
To connect with again. So that's something that we do. Individual factors, relationship factors, of course. How do we prevent this to happen? Ideally, we are building this new narrative with this experience completely integrated, right? We don't want to forget that this happened. We just want to integrate that this will belong to our story from now on. How do we create a narrative of what happened before, what made this happen, and what will happen in the future, if there's a future? So basically, we give context to what happened. Here, I have to say that, again, because I'm very systemic, but I have to say that we should, there's a sense of impunity about infidelity. Again, because of that, infidelity is morally wrong for almost all of us, right? No matter the type, but it's morally wrong. Although that moral judgment hasn't helped us much, right?
No.
It doesn't prevent that to happen. So it is morally wrong, but it is and morally wrong across all cultures. This is interesting. Still, it happens, and it happens to more people or with certain characteristics than other people. So we have to address that. What are the contextual, the macro systemic ingredients that were there to make that happen? Because sometimes you were saying before the sense of opportunity. Yes, we have opportunities, but we don't have the exact same opportunities equally, like among us. It's different. So we also want to address this. Or is there a pattern of infidelity running in your family? Because that's common also to find. And we dive into this phase, into these topics. Phase 3, finally, I call it the vision and the decision. So I usually say this to couples in the beginning because I believe that couples don't want, and they're not even ready, or they're not even able to conceptualize forgiveness in the beginning of the process.
No.
They're not there.
It's too rough.
It's too difficult. But after a while, they are okay with that perspective, right? And they feel more ready because we've discussed so many things. They feel more ready, and here I mentioned particularly the betrayed partner, to make a decision, right? Should I stay or should I go? And I find it works as it functions as a relief for betrayed partners not to have to make a decision right in the beginning. What are you looking for in couples therapy? Do you want to stay together or not? That we don't do in the beginning. So just further along the process, we address that decision, and there we have to discuss, because that requires also some commitment from the betrayed partner. For example, I have to make a commitment, a pact with myself that I won't, I don't know, be vindictive my whole life, or that I want to see and really perceive my partner as someone that made a mistake, fine, but it's
not the mistake.
Not the mistake.
Yes.
So I have, and that requires something from the betrayed partner.
Definitely.
This is on me, right? So we have to address all these things, and then we should ask: is this tolerable to live with? Is this possible? Usually, here we talk about and we discuss about forgiveness. I follow my couples on this. I don't necessarily. I don't think it is necessary to have forgiveness. And I usually discuss the difference between what is forgiveness and reconciliation.
Yes.
Right? We can have reconciliation without forgiveness, right? But how does it? What does that mean to you couple, right? And how can we proceed from here? And then, the idea is how to prevent triggers. They will be there. And how do we continue writing our story and new chapters of our story?
Okay. So the first part is really all about discovery and establishing boundaries, and those should be time limited and really carefully thought through, not just in the short term, but in the medium and the long term. The second phase is about the context and all of the varying factors that contributed to what happened. And the final phase is about how do we rewrite our story, our narrative, and where do we go from here? So the time with you today really flew. But before we go, there's a question that I really want to ask you, because it's a question that we get a lot. And it is, do you believe that once a cheater, always a cheater?
That's a very difficult one. It is difficult for me. And I wouldn't be a psychologist if I say yes or no. But it is very difficult for me to believe that cheating becomes almost, I don't know, sort of a personality trait, right? I don't think it is. I think it's an act or many acts, but it is a behavior rather than a personality trait or
A given
state.
also.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about that. Well, and I believe, and as a psychologist, I really believe that if we reflect on what we've done, even if we have cheated on our partners, if we reflect on that, that could be preventive enough for me not to do it again. Or if I constantly do it, I also have to, I don't have, but I could think about it, right? What am I doing? Is this my relational responsibility? Is this so low? I don't consider, like, when I hear that expression, I feel that we are talking about people as if we are like little psychopaths, that we really disregard the other people's emotions.
Yeah.
And I don't think we are people like that.
Yeah.
Right?
And I
Most of
think it's
us.
difficult to just dump someone into a box. You're a cheater
Forever.
and you're not a cheater. I definitely agree with you. I think my answer would be not necessarily. Definitely some people will do it more than once. Definitely some people will do it only once, and that experience, what it does to them, the relationship and the other party or parties might be enough to kind of stop. And if it is somebody that is doing it perpetually, then it's a good idea to kind of reflect on what that's achieving for you. And
Therapy
what
could be an idea.
definitely really helpful for insight and for awareness building. Thank you, Rita, so much for your time today. It was really a pleasure. As I said at the beginning of this episode, you're with us at Thrive. And so if anyone wants to get in touch to work with you individually as part of a couple, infidelity or not, or family, then they can find you with us, and you offer your services in English and Portuguese. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.